Welcome to Emergency Use Only, a podcast that offers you empowered living in a complex world with your host, Dr. Sean Rowland, founder and CEO of Jace Medical.
We're truly honored to have Philip Cowley, Doctor of Pharmacy, as our first guest. Now, if you're not one of Phil's nearly 2 million followers on social media, you should consider finding and subscribing to him, where you can find him at Phil's My Pharmacist. He puts out some amazing content. Back in 2002, Phil was a brand new grad, fresh out of pharmacy school at the University of Utah. He chose to take out a loan and start his own business. He opened a pharmacy in Logan, Utah, which did really well up until COVID, when things got difficult. At that time, Phil started reaching out via social media, creating some really unique content. He truly is passionate about education and empowerment. So without further ado, here's Phil's My Pharmacist. Well, thank you so much again for being willing to do this. You are our inaugural podcast episode guest, so this is big. So thank you for coming on.
This is a big deal.
Yeah. Well, so
maybe a mistake on your part, so you maybe should have chose somebody else. We'll see how this goes for you.
Doubt it. I doubt it. I know you're used to the camera. This is and being recorded, so you're the pro here. Well, to get things started, I thought, just wanted to start off easy and just have you let us know how things are going, what's going on with TikTok, with Instagram, with your efforts, and just kind of in your world, what's going on right now?
So we started, it's 2 years coming up on Instagram. We started about 2 years ago, and it just keeps growing and growing. But the concept behind me starting social media was so I could get home with my kids. And now I find that I'm just working 2 jobs, because now the pharmacy is still going, but now I do this like full time. But it's actually going really well. And the coolest thing are the people that you've met. Like it's interesting how I used to say I didn't believe, like I had no faith in humanity. Like I honestly used to say, humanity's going downhill. I actually asked my wife at one point if she thought there were more good people or bad people in the world. And we back and forth. I thought, how sad is it we even have to discuss that? But between TikTok and Instagram, I got to be honest, there's so many more good people than bad people in this world. It's just the bad people are so noisy that they change the way we see everything. So I got to be honest, I really feel encouraged about life because of social media. That's where we're sitting at.
That's refreshing. I think definitely a different take from what we hear a lot about how social media is, the downfall of society. But so that's refreshing to hear that. Tell me, as far as, take me back to before your undergrad. I understand
Right.
You bounced around to a few schools as an undergrad, and take me through kind of how a little bit of your life journey that got you to where we are today.
So I grew up in Utah County. That's where I grew up, was in Pleasant Grove, back when Utah County didn't look like it looks now, when it was little and you could get away with going quail hunting behind houses up in the foothills. And I mean, it grew up and my dad had a construction company. He owns part of a garage door company called Garage Doors. And I pretty much figured I was headed down the construction route like, well, everybody else. And then I served an LDS mission. And I went to Korea. And when I got to Korea, the mission president actually pulled me aside and said that if you work construction, it would be a waste. He said that you can learn and you need to quit being lazy, because completely called me out on the fact I'd skidded through all of life. I found that in high school, if you get a B, nobody bothers you. If you get an A, they want you to do better. And if you get a C, they get after you. So a B plus average gets you right through with no problem. So I come back from my mission. I'm like, well, I'm going to be a doctor because, doctors get girls into college. That's you say that, and it helps your dating game. And then I visited with a few doctors' wives while I was hanging garage doors, and I decided maybe it's not all it cracks up to be. So at which point we were going to fill a prescription. My wife and I, we were in Payson, and we went to fill a prescription.
Were you married at the time?
Yeah. I had already I was pre-med. I mean, I was pulling the grades. I was doing the whole thing, but I was also hanging garage doors. So I was undergrad. I was going to UVSC at the time. That's how old I am. It wasn't even UVU at the time, UVSC at the time. And I'd already been to Snow College and USU. And then we moved back towards Utah County so I could hang garage doors because I didn't want to have debt going through school. I just don't like debt. I don't like what's next. Like, I'm a planner, I guess you'd say, because I was worried worst case scenario and then never happens. But we went into a Payson Smith's and we walked up to the counter and we filled a prescription while we were there married. And I'm like, maybe I should do this. And so the next 48 hours, I researched it, saw what it took, saw that you got to have interaction with patients, a lot of patients. And there was a real chance there to be something. And so I actually applied, I think 2 weeks later. I mean, I was that close because I had all my undergraduate stuff done. I was ready to go to medical school. I think I had 2 semesters left and I could have applied to medical school, and I decided to take this other route. And so we switched over and got into pharmacy school about 8 months later, a year later. And then we came right up here to Logan, and I did the worst thing possible. If you want to have time off, I started my own store. And so then I started looking at the doctors I worked with. I'm like, heck, I should have gone that route. They're off more than I am. So it was a complete mistake on my part. Like I think I was always going to load my plate up too heavy.
Do you have any other,
and so,
any siblings in medicine or in healthcare, family members?
I've got a sister that's an MA, and then I've got one that works at a dental office as a billing agent. But I was actually the first person in my family to graduate from college. Wow. Direct. Yeah. And so there's been uncles and everything else, but it was the first to graduate from college. And then I moved on, and then I got my master's with pharmacy because that's ended up what you get. And so that's, we're up here in Logan, and our oldest boy has some cerebral scarring from in vivo. So we had a bunch of infertility issues along the way, which, in Utah world, when you have a kid at 27, that's late. Like, you should have had 3 by then. Right. So, so at 27, we struggled to get Jonas here, and we had the store open, and life just kind of rolled me for a while. And for about 10, 15 years, I just kept my head afloat by having the store. And it gave me an outlet, though, because you have to work so hard when you own your own store. So there are patients in my store today that have been here for all 20 years. Wow. So you get to know them, and you're the most accessible healthcare worker because they can just walk up to the counter and bang on it, and boom, there you are. I mean, everybody else has got some level of give us a minute, And a lot of pharmacists don't take advantage of that. But because I own my own store, I had to treat everybody differently. I had to see people as individuals rather than, because it was up to me. Like, I had to have them want to come back.
Services.
And I think that
key, yeah.
I think that changes everything, though. Like, when you have a personal responsibility for someone, when you decide to see that individual, like, really see them.
And the continuity there that you're going to see them again next month, or absolutely. What's changed, do you think, in the last 15 years as from a community pharmacy business owner? Like, what are some of the changes you've experienced, or good, bad? How are things now?
So when we got started, the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare, wasn't in existence. And even before that, President Bush gave prescription coverage to a senior. So I kind of went from when there was no coverage and you had to go get your own stuff to now where, what is it, like 60% of all claims in the pharmacy world come from a federal agency in one way or the other. And so we've seen that double-digit increase in costs of goods. We've seen the inflation of medical care. I kind of watched all of it one by one, and I've seen care decrease while the amount of money being spent has been increased. Yes. I mean, how can we afford, what is it now? 18.9% of the GDP is now put towards medical care, right? And to become a physician, what's it cost now? Crazy numbers, right?
I'm embarrassed. I don't say it unless I know people really well, but it's cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. So yeah. And yeah, to your point, costs going up. Seems like in a lot of ways service is going down. But you look at reimbursements for the actual healthcare providers, and whether it's pharmacists, whether it's physicians, nurses, their reimbursements are going down and costs are going up. So there's that might be, I don't know, it might be a conversation for another day there, but
I was actually studying on that. So there's three main PBMs, which are prescription benefit prescription benefit management groups. There's three of them. And so I thought to myself, okay, so my pharmacy reimbursements are down by about 3 to 5%, which I would expect because the economy's terrible, inflation's in place. And I know people come in and farmers are doing worse. Your construction workers everybody's doing worse. And so I kind of expected that. So I looked up the PBMs. One of them made 11% higher this year than they did last year in the first quarter. The other one made 13% higher. And the last one, I couldn't find the percent, but they made $281 million in profit last quarter. Now, physicians aren't making extra money. Nurses most certainly aren't making any extra money. Pharmacists aren't making money, but the costs are going up, and it's coming to a point, and I don't want to pick any more enemies. I already have plenty anyway, because what I say and how I say it. Yeah. But I am going to say that there's a point where it comes up where you have to start believing more in educating patients than you do treating the patient. Even like you have to sit down in the room and say, this is up to you, because there's coming a point where we can't afford the process the way it's currently placed, in my opinion. We just can't afford it.
Yeah, you kind of hit on exactly what I'd love to get into. Well, two things. You mentioned not wanting to make any more enemies based on. I kind of do want to talk about that a little bit, because I think.
Yeah.
So for me, the first time I saw you, came on my For You page on TikTok, and this was probably right at the beginning. When did you start on TikTok? Like, was about 2 years ago almost.
Yeah, it was October. Will be 2 years, so okay. It kind of hit fast, and I was not expecting.
So yeah, this was probably maybe November-ish of last year, and I thought, oh, this guy's great. This is awesome, and followed and just kind of followed along, and then but I do remember thinking like, wow, so he's kind of just out there telling patients how to compound their own medications. This is interesting. And I thought it was great. I thought it was awesome that you were kind of, because I'm a big proponent of empowering patients, of taking the time to educate people and give them more tools. But then also you got to balance that with people who maybe are not quite on the same page and feel like maybe there's something that might be irresponsible to do that. How has your approach been when you think about what it is you're gonna a video you're gonna make, or what you're gonna say or not say? How do you balance that?
It's funny, because I've had videos where I'm getting ready to shoot them because I think it's okay. So let's talk the amoxicillin shortage, just because it's a great example, right? You couldn't find amoxicillin in a suspension form any place. Like, it was gone. Yep. And parents are crying because their kids, they're worried. And I'm sitting there looking at these kids thinking, you're going to have hospitalizations. We're going to have and every healthcare provider out there, whether you're a nurse or a doctor, if you've been an MA, you already know you can open amoxicillin capsules up. Like, it's no secret. And so I went and I sat there in front of the camera. I'm like, this one's going to get me in trouble. I mean, I knew what I told people. They could just mix it and just open it up, tell your doctor to write it in capsules, put it in Strawberry Quick. Your kids will take it down. It'll taste the same. And I'm like, I shot it. And I remember looking at the screen thinking, oh, this one's going to kill me, because first of all, I knew a bunch of pharmacists that were charging $60, $70, $80 to mix it up for people. And they were bragging how much money they were making, which set me off, because obviously they've never been poor. Like, if you've ever been without money, if you've ever seen your dad have to write a check, he doesn't know if he's going to clear or not. The idea that you would do that on a medication like that,
like I was of it being a parent trying to help their child and being poor, not having the means. Yeah.
And a parent will do anything to take care of their child. They will put themselves in debt. And so anybody that is willing to profit off of that, it set me off. Like, it really set me off. And then the second thing I knew is okay, on this one, it's going to get enough traction that you're going to have because you get a group of people who make a living on social medias by creating drama. I don't know how to say it more than that. Like, they'll come out and they'll say, "How dare you tell people that?" And I'm like, yeah, 2 seconds ago I just watched 2 kids have concussions. I think that I'm the least of the worries on social media, But at that point, I put it out there, and I got a call from the state, from Department of Licensing, and they're like, "You have to take that down." I did. I had a call from them. They said, "You have to take that down." And I said, "Well, why do I need to take it down?" And I said, "And why are you calling me at Cache Valley Pharmacy? Because it has nothing to do with my pharmacy. You should have called me as an individual." And they said, "Well, you have to take it down. We've had complaints across the nation." I said, "Since when does the state of Utah care what somebody in New York thinks anyway? Like, wow. That's got nothing to do with here." And she said, "Well, the problem is you're going to get people hurt." And I said, "Oh, this is going to be the thing on social media that hurts people. It's not everything. This is it." And she said, "You need to take it." I said, "Look, I don't want to lose my license. I don't want to cause a big thing here. I'll take it down, but I think you're hurting a lot more people by taking this down."
Was that because you,
I
guess, crossed the line from an OTC to a prescription? Had it been some, or did you think, or did that not have anything to do with it?
I don't know. I sent them YouTube. Like, if you go to YouTube, there's a full online course on how to compound that you can just click on, and it steps you through everything you make. So it's not like it's not out there, I think it was just that I had riled enough people up that they got phone calls, and honestly, there's no pharmacists that do what those doing. I don't think anybody knew how to handle it.
Yeah.
But, the funny thing is that you'll get called out, and then people are like, they're like, "Oh, he's a charlatan." And then somebody will say, "Well, how is he making any money off of that? Like, what did he do? He didn't sell you anything. He just told you how to make it."
It's the opposite.
And so then I demanded a meeting with the Department of Licensing. I said, "I want to sit down because I don't want to cross any lines, but I need to understand if you're really ready to regulate the internet. Is that really on your agenda? If so, I have a few, honestly, if that's the case, then you better get after Dr. Pimple Popper, because she goes step through step on how to remove a cyst. And you have to be a doctor to be able to do that. And she just showed you all the steps. And how is mixing amoxicillin different than what these guys are showing you?"
Or any of these, anything that you always put the disclaimer of, this is for educational purposes only. And that allows you, I guess, to say and do whatever you want. But yeah.
I mean, would you rather have somebody mixing amoxicillin or putting together their own 220 line in their house? I mean, which one is more dangerous? Because as an ER doctor, I'm guessing you've seen more electrical burns than amoxicillin overdoses. It's just my guess.
Gets into we're doing Jay's daily service where we provide patients. It's up to a year supply of like a chronic medication that they're stable on, that they've taken for a while. We don't diagnose a new condition, any of that, but the very initial, you say that to other doctors and it's just a lot of them will have to stop and think, wait a minute, you're going to give a patient with a major depressive disorder a year's worth of Prozac? Geez, that seems really dangerous. Yeah. Well, 365 pills versus 30 pills that you are happy to give them. It's just as not deadly, but as far as overdosing, you have just as much of a chance of overdosing on a bottle as on 5 bottles.
Isn't the truth the most dangerous thing with an antidepressant is when they come off and then go back on and come off and come back on? So
if you're going to if someone does lose access and all of a sudden they just can't take their med from one day to the next, that's very dangerous. Absolutely, the withdrawal from SSRIs is dangerous. So. Yeah, it just gets back to, it's kind of, you have to just tweak a little bit the way you maybe used to approach things and say, okay, I see what you're doing, and this actually makes good sense. And the fears that I had that it was somehow dangerous or more are not valid, not likely. Or to your point, someone mixing it and again, this is the big caveat is they didn't have any other option. This was their only option. Or they could wait until their child got so sick that they ended up in the hospital with other complications. And so yes, the argument I think is valid to say, here's I'm going to try to teach them the best possible way, give them tools. Now, for some reason, because they're not a trained pharmacist, they miscalculate a little bit. It's not going to kill their child. And again, that's the balance. It's a hard balance though. And I can see, you do see people coming on both sides of both sides of it. And that's why I was intrigued seeing these and like, okay, I'm curious. And so I had no idea. That's interesting. And good to you. Good, like kudos to you for, actually engaging with the board and speaking with them and speaking your mind. So how did it ultimately turn out?
It was fine. They were going to have somebody. I said, look, here's the deal. If you ever see anything, just call me directly. I'd be glad to talk to you. But the truth is that you better be sure that it's not already out there, and that, if you're telling me to not tell you to mix it. And I sent them 17 different state health departments recommendations on how to mix them at home. I said 17 states are having this on their health department, and I'm sitting in this meeting. This is ridiculous. But the other thing that I think that needs to be considered at this point is the best case scenario is a person gets sick. They go right into a physician. The physician sees them. They're able to look to see if there's other conditions. Is your kidney function good? Holy cow, where did that mole come from? Because it's kind of like when police officers pull you over for a speeding ticket. The speeding ticket doesn't mean anything, but they catch so many other people. That's your shot as a physician. But that's not the world we live in anymore. Now you call up your doctor and they're like, yeah, I'll see you in 3.5 weeks. And because the doctor is going to see what? They used to see 15, 18 patients. Now you're trying to see 26 just to break even. And you're already stacked out 2 weeks. And so if the world could go back to where healthcare was accessible and affordable for everybody, then I would 100% agree, don't ever show them how to mix their amoxicillin. But I see the future being so much more, you have to take care of yourself. I don't think that there's a world where we don't have to start showing people saying, hey, in this emergency box, you have access to something. So if you have chronic diarrhea right now, we have something to help you out with, because you're not going to be able to even see a doctor for 3 weeks. So,
yeah, it's a different world. You can look at the projected shortages of primary care physicians into the next decade. And it's a huge range, but they're all big numbers. Access to healthcare, there's so many aspects to it. And hopefully this is maybe a period of time where this becomes it's necessary to exactly like you said, allow, or not, I don't know if allow is the right word, but facilitate and help people with other, maybe what are non-traditional ways of delivering healthcare, to bridge a gap, and maybe we'll catch up on the other side. But for now, we've got people who don't have access, whether it's to physicians, to medications, for all kinds of reasons. We haven't even touched on, the supply chain and those kinds of things. I mean, why was it that amoxicillin was nowhere to be found? Ask the FDA, and you'll get some answers, but not really. And that's another part of the big problem is got these shortages, and everyone's got an idea why, but no one really knows. No one can really tell me exactly where the medications that are in amoxicillin, why that was in shortage, why it took so long to get caught up, and even and that's just one medication that happens all the time.
Well, the funny thing about the amoxicillin is the more I've chased it down, the more I think it actually had to do with the plastic bottles than it did the amoxicillin itself. They couldn't get the bottles inside of the factories in China and in India that produce almost all the amoxicillin. We haven't produced penicillin in the United States. I think I saw it since 1962. We haven't produced any because it's not affordable. Because how do you do it for 17 cents?
Yeah, it's all follow the money for all this. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a race to the bottom, and everything got outsourced. And so we're left importing stuff that we use.
So you look at right, and then if you look to say, okay, so there's two different components. There's where does the drug come from, and that's the plant that's responsible right before they ship it in. But the step before that, the raw bulk pharmaceutical ingredient, the FDA doesn't even track that. They don't even know, because it's not in their tracking. They don't even know where the raw ingredient comes from, because it's not necessary to track that.
Exactly. And actually there's, the manufacturers of the APIs of those active pharmaceutical ingredients in China are not required to divulge the sources of those materials, of where they source their stuff for their APIs. And there's right. You can get into the quality control, where there's just no transparency when it comes to if there are quality issues. Supposedly the FDA is the only one that is privy to that information, to actually what is the quality issue. But it's not released to the general public. It's confidential. It's a laundry list of broken parts and broken pieces. So what do we do? I guess you're in your corner of the
We
world.
bring it home. I think we bring it home. I think so. You think about infrastructure costs, and I think that right now we look at infrastructure pretty. We're spending a lot of money on infrastructure. If I pay somebody to build a interstate highway, it produces jobs currently for today, and it helps that area currently. But if you were to take in some of the more areas in the United States that need jobs, that need support, if we were to say, okay, let's put money on building pharmaceutical companies that build APIs that do that, that would be a reoccurrent source of tax income forever. And then we would be less dependent on a foreign source for something that is absolutely essential, probably more essential than energy at this point, because when medical care, doctors would call me up from all over. Even they still do with the Adderall shortage. They're like, hey, do you have any? And I'm like, yeah, you're not getting any more because we can't even make more of the API inside the United States because the DEA won't let us make more. So it's not going anywhere. If it was me, I would bring it home and I would take infrastructure costs and I would put it in building pharmaceutical to make the APIs themselves. And then at that point, you would create jobs that would have income forever, and that income would drive tax revenue. And so instead of one time, you would have this reoccurrent job market for these people.
And at some point, I guess we have to get used to the idea that some things, certainly when we're talking about things as vital as medications, we might just have to pay a little more for them because they're made domestically. You mentioned the profits being that. I mean, that's why they went overseas to begin with. So bringing them back, absolutely. I think you'd have more control over quality. It would just, the list goes on, but ultimately though, it's going to cost more, than what we've been doing.
Potentially, but then if you have to start considering that the biologics, so anything that says MAB at the end of the medication right now, that's making 55% of the total cost of all medications right now. The generic drugs are less than 20% of the total cost of all the medications that everybody takes. So we go from your amoxicillin costing $5 to $10 so we can produce it domestically. That's not going to be the thing that changes the outcourse of the medications.
Like on an individual level, the cost isn't going to be, you're not going to see or feel that really near as much. Maybe when you look at it across the board, oh my gosh, you had a 50% increase. But when you're talking about pennies for what these medications cost, then you're right. So that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way.
And Humira, when Humira first came out, so it's one of the monoclonals that are out there. The Humira came out first time, it was $1,800. They've now increased the price up to $3,600. So you can make a lot of amoxicillin for $1,800 and still make a good margin on it. So I don't know. I look at it. I do understand the concern about the raising costs, but I think that anybody thinks that you're going to save the American medical system off of cheap generic drugs has not looked at the data.
Yeah, no, I agree. Tell me, Phil's My Pharmacist. Where did you figure out the name? How'd you decide what to call your channel?
So we were getting started, and all I wanted to do is get 1,000 people because I wanted to save my pharmacy because we were tanking. We saw the margin drop before everybody else did because I didn't do anything with COVID shots or COVID tests because there was a Test Utah site right out in front of my store. But so there's and I was inside a hospital. So all the doctors went telehealth. And so my walkthrough business died off and I wasn't getting any of the COVID. And I noticed that our reimbursements had been really bad. And so it was my wife and I, and I'm sitting in the bathroom next to her while she was doing her makeup or something. And I was obviously whining to my wife so she could give me, because anybody who's got a good marriage, the wife always picks up the man a little bit when he's down. He pretends like he's tough when he shuts that bathroom door, but inside there, he gets to be weak. So I'm in there being weak and saying that we're going to lose everything and doomsdaying and Chicken Little, whatever you want to call it. And she said, well, your Instagram's growing pretty good. You're up to like 300 and something. And we were calling it Cache Valley Pharmacy. And I looked at her and said, you know what? Cache Valley Pharmacy will never really take off as an Instagram. It just doesn't. I said, the only way you can brand something is if you brand it off yourself. So I said, if we're going to do this, I have to it has to be Phil. Mm-hmm. And then she said, yeah, Phil the Pharmacist. And I said, no, let's Phil's My Pharmacist. That way it'll be Phil a little more like I'm there to help him. And that was when we were really first on. So we switched the name and became Phil's My Pharmacist at that moment. And the nice thing is it gives me personal responsibility for what I say. And so some people don't like what I say, but the truth is if you want to sit with me and say, okay, why did you teach him that? I would sit and talk to anybody about my reasoning behind what I do and take personal responsibility. And that's where the Phil's My Pharmacist came from. And then it's kind of gone. I love it though. You talked about amoxicillin. I had this little mom in Detroit who sent me a DM that was a video, and she had her kid in the back, and the kid just looked lethargic as can be. I mean, you know what they look like. They come in and you're like, oh, I think that's a rag doll in the back seat. And she said, I've driven to 7 pharmacies and they cannot find my amoxicillin. What can I do? I'm like, you know what? I'll show you what to. And so I just sent her back. I'm like, it's like this. You open up this, you put it on here. Just tell your doctor to call in the capsules. It'll cost you pennies. And she said, oh, I found a pharmacy that would do it for $50. And I remember that moment where I'm like, I like the personal responsibility. I like the fact there is some little mom in Detroit who's never had real access to a pharmacist, who now understands the purpose of a pharmacist. And we're not just that guy in the back of the grocery store. It's like we have. And I thought to myself, there's this chance for me to change the way we're seen as pharmacists, to go back to the 1950s. Like there's this little chance. And if I can help all pharmacists and help people, why would I not do it?
It's a beautiful tragedy. I think it's beautiful that you are able to connect on such a wide, to your patients there locally, to people across the world. And on a real personal level, that's affected. That's beautiful. It's tragic that to your point, that she hadn't been able to have that kind of an interaction with anyone up to that period, up to that time. How many pharmacists did she pass driving around looking for, before she happened upon a TikTok, someone that she's following that she could reach out to? I don't know. So I'm on the one hand, I love it. I'm encouraged. On the other hand, you get discouraged that's the current state of affairs.
Well, it's the way they run ER doctors in and out of rooms now. Like it used to be, doctors were the most trusted profession for a long time, and then pharmacists, and now it's moved to nurses. If you look at the most trusted profession, it is the profession that has to take time with the patient. And the more that the system itself shoves us away from the patient, the less they trust us. And the less patients trust us, the less the medical care itself decreases substantially. That's and so until we can get
I think
the guys out of the middle, we're in trouble.
I think we've taken it for granted for so long that it is the honorable profession. It is, that trust, just, you don't necessarily even have to earn it. You're given that trust just because of your title. But you're absolutely right. As the system is interjected in between you. I mean, that was our stories are similar in have a lot of parallels in a lot of ways. Right outside of my training, the first thing I did was, I'm going to start a direct primary care practice. I do not want to have this big entity in between me and my patient who's dictating how much time I can spend with my patient, what I can talk to him about, what I'm allowed to do and not allowed to do. And so it's the same thing. I went into even more debt right after to start a practice with nothing out of training, but it was for that very reason. That's one of I think there's a lot of commonality in just how we think. Tell me, you mentioned that mom from Detroit. Can you think of any other, not necessarily, they don't have to be, through social media, but just any memorable patients that have inspired you, taught you something about life, maybe changed the way you thought about life or approached life?
So there's a nail salon in New York that I have to go visit at some point. And there was a mom. I find that, okay, so where we're at, we have this community, and we have these parents and these grandparents, and we have just a lot of wealth of information. So when your baby has a diaper rash, somebody who's had kids with diaper rashes are right there. But there was this little nail salon, and this mom, very, very early on, finds me, and she said, my kids had a diaper rash. I've gone to the ER twice and I've gone to her pediatrician, and they say, just use what you're using, and they push me out the door. And I'm imagining these places that, like you see on TV, where there's just people in the hallway. They're so busy, and like, who has time? There's a gunshot wound. Who has time for a diaper rash is what I'm picturing in my head. But she says, is there anything I can do? And so I introduce her to Camelseptine, which is over the counter. It's been around for years. I say, you need to take Camelseptine, but then you need to do that twice. And then I need you to take and put Maalox in the diaper and let it dry, because if you can smell the acidic poop from the baby, it will never, ever get better. So you've got to neutral. These are just tricks that a pediatrician does all the time and sends out, so just tell him to do this and this. So it's not my idea. It was actually Dr. Labram loves this stuff. I'm like, just do this and this. And I'm thinking to myself, all it can do is help. And so she sends back and she said that her baby, so she says her baby's bottom is bleeding and cracked. And she's like if you could hear a DM cry, it was like sobbing, you know? And then 3 days later, she goes, it's all better. Well, I don't know what you did, but it's all better. I'm like, I didn't do anything. And then next thing I know, I've got like 8 women from this nail salon. And this was super early on, like telling me thank you. And they're all got these nails that are like, you know, way out to here. And they're just super colorful people. And I don't know. I mean, in the long run, it's not going to be money that you get remembered. I think this all the time. I don't really, but it's the good you get to put out in the world. I mean, I'm 50 years old now. I'm 48. And I went through the phase of where I wanted wave runners, and we had a cabin, and I thought I wanted that stuff, and I was miserable. And then at some point now, the idea that I can go on and I can tell, so personally, I kind of struggle a little bit with depression and anxiety, and I have some ideation, and ideation isn't the same as suicide. Ideation is different. Ideation is what happens when you take a person and you squish them with too much weight in their backpack and tell them to hike too far and put too many jobs on their plate and answer too many phones and put 3 audits on them. And it's the fact of if that all went away, it would be peaceful. And I remember one of the posts I went out there, I just decided to be real and just say, man, it sucks. Like, you feel a lot of pressure. You feel like you can't be weak. You can't. And there's nothing out there and there's nobody to help, but that we all feel that way. We just got to stop saying everything's going to be okay and just start talking to each other. We got to learn. And I had somebody come in the next day, and he was kind of beside himself. He said that it was a bad night for him, and that he thinks a lot about it. And I thought to myself, I could have just changed not just him, but his kid's life, just because I had this opportunity to be kind. And you know, I can sell a lot of blood pressure medication, and I don't know if I really feel that you did something good. And I think that healthcare, that's what we strive for, is that one moment. Like if you talk to a doctor, when was it that was most impactful? It's these one moments between the 57 other people, or 157.
It gets back to that, just that disconnect, you know, that we're experiencing, not the disconnect, but the lack of opportunity, because it's been taken away. Because it's a high stress profession, and it's always been okay because you had that connection, and you had those moments, and they're so powerful, and they might just be moments. And it might be something that, looking from the outside in, you're kind of like, you know, you're talking about this experience with helping this mom with a baby with diaper rash, and yeah, okay. But on the inside, the feeling that comes from that, the intangibles are that's what gets you through. That's what carries you to the next patient, to the next moment, to the next day in your life, whatever it is. And so I feel like we've got so many barriers in between us and those, whether it's a patient or anything else in your life, that prevents that connection from occurring. And then you end up with those never-ending onslaught of thoughts and feelings about, man, it would be nice to just take a break from all of this.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that we start looking at the individual that walks through the door in such a manner that we educate them, and so they feel like they've been seen and heard. And I think that if social media is my way to say, go talk to your pharmacist, go talk to your doctor, demand better, demand more, and they'll give it to you because they really want to. They're just distracted because they've got 3 managers and 4 different insurance companies on their back. You do that. If you'll go demand it from your doctor, if you'll go demand it from your pharmacist, you will make the pharmacist and the doctor's day better, because you're like, no, I really need your help. At that moment, you'll make them better.
Do you think so? Do you think that are you the exception to the rule in your profession, or are there thousands of pharmacists out there just cheering you on, being like, yes, that's and just they are you and you are them? Or what do you think? Or is there something different about the way your brain works and you approach these problems?
I think that we get trained into a box Does that make sense? Like you start out with these big dreams. Like if you look at everybody's application for nursing school or med school or for pharmacies, I want to help people. I want to change the system. I want to be involved. And then over time, you're like, well, don't do that. You'll get sued. If you say that, they'll yell at you. You can't do that or you'll get audited. And they box you into this little box. But I think everybody who decides I'm going to go into healthcare, their original concept is what I'm trying to get back out of myself. Like I still have to push against it myself. When the state calls you up to take that down, my first thought was, oh no, they're going to take my store from me. And then I went home. I'm like, no, screw this. People need to hear this. I'm willing to put myself out over this. And I think that the majority, anybody who goes into this profession, they start out with the idea that they can help people. And then they get boxed into how can I not get into trouble? And then you realize that that's not really a thing, but you're just so boxed in. I do think inside every nurse, every pharmacist, every physician, there's that person who just truly wants to help people. I think that person is in there. You just have to get them to not be afraid for a moment. And that's hard. Courage is hard.
No, but being out front and kind of leading the charge does. I mean, I think that's one more. There's so many different aspects to this platform that you've created and that is growing. Of course, interacting with individuals, empowering patients, providing these tools, but then also, showing your fellow professionals like guys, you can get out of the box. Tell me, you had mentioned I heard in another interview, something about getting a van, and you were going to travel around in a van. What's going on? Do we have the van yet?
The van's there. I've got the van. So I've got the van, and I got to be honest, I took a huge step and I hired a guy to come in and buy into this part of the store. I'm taking this.
Oh, wow.
So I always talk to people about how we have these different types of pathways in our brains. You have the residual pathways and then you have the degraded pathways. And so our brains are super lazy. And so an example of residual pathways, when I leave here, I'm going to go the exact way home, the exact way. And I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to go there. My brain knows it. They're not going to expend any extra energy. A degraded pathway is a pathway that you had for a while, but the brain decided it was no longer necessary. And so I found in my career that I keep going back to these residual pathways that are negative. So I show up to work for 50 hours because that's what I did last week. And that's what I did the year before. And that feels safe to me because I always do that. But then I'm continually unhappy because I never get to see my kids, but I keep showing up to work. And so my wife and I sat down and I decided that I have one child that's a senior. The other one, Jonas, who's got my oldest that has his issues. He's still with us. And then I have another one that's a sophomore. And then I have one that's 13. I'm like 5 years from empty nest. And I decided we're doing this. And I brought somebody in, and I keep telling myself, like every morning I wake up, just have courage because I'm ready to break out. The van is sitting in the driveway. I want to go visit people. I want to stop and see what they're doing. The best part of my day is meeting people. And I think that if I have enough courage, I think that there are people who want to see this, who want to hear stories from healthcare. They want to stop and see this nurse who's not seen her own children in 3 days and what she's doing. The people want to see these stories. The pharmacists, the doctors, they want to see it. And I think that if we can empower what I call the hands-on part of the medical system, we can change and get all the greed out of the middle. There's plenty of money to make this system work. But you can't have somebody make 11%, make $500 million a quarter who doesn't do anything anymore. We have to be hands-on. So I'm ready. People want me to come visit, just send it off. I'll come visit anybody. I'm ready to come see you.
I love it. I think it's it's inspiring to first of all, the idea of you taking the show on the road, I think is amazing. But just, it's kind of back to telling yourself, we're talking about breaking out of the box. I mean, it's the same thing, breaking out of that mental box that says this is the way you've always done things. And so this is comfortable and this is the way you should keep doing them. That's inspiring to even think about. And I'm excited.
Well, physicians like you are essential because I need a physician who doesn't want to come out of school and then go fit into a system that the computer, once you type in what that has, the computer will tell you your treatment modality. I know there's systems out there because I'll see the computer designs what the physician is. I need physicians like you to fill. If I can do my thing as a pharmacist, think, well, if pharmacists can do that, why am I not out there more saying, and I've seen people message me, podiatrists, everybody else, like, you know what? I'm done with working the system. And if I can inspire them, because there is somebody out there who's better than me at everything. All my job is to say, okay, it's time to quit putting up with the garbage and get out there and do what you came for. And I love what you do. Like if you got that practice where you take care of that patient beginning to end and they're yours and they can call you up on a Saturday and say, I have an ear infection. I don't want to go sit in an urgent care. Like those physicians who are willing to, you guys are going to be essential.
It's hard. It's hard because I think it's a much better way to deliver care. And on an individual level, you can't beat it. How do you replicate that across, because you only have so many minutes and hours that you can engage with it. I love that I can sit down for an hour, not talk about just whatever it was that brought you in here today, make another appointment so we can address this other issue. Let's talk about everything, because our bodies are not just different pieces that are just kind of crammed together. Everything works in concert, and that's the way that we should be approaching health. And so if you're coming to talk, let's talk about everything, and let's try and be as holistic about this approach as we can. But how do I replicate myself in order to do that for hundreds and thousands of patients? That seems to be the difficulty that we're in. But I do think there is, from a purely how you deliver healthcare, that because it goes both ways. It's not just so that you're delivering high quality healthcare to the patient, but so that you as the practitioner are also getting that biofeedback back to your brain that says this is worth it. It's worth taking these calls in the middle of the night because you get something out of it. You get that fulfillment out of it, which we've talked about before, right? Just how that's just been killed in our current system, and everyone's living through the consequences, not just the patients, but the healthcare professionals as well. I
don't see the healthcare professionals staying in the business if we don't change something either. Like it's the burnout rate that's happening right now will be catastrophic, and then it'll just cascade on itself. And so I think that I find myself to be a very mediocre, like I'm in the middle of the road kind of thing. I think that most physicians, most doctors, most nurses, most pharmacists, I think they all have something in them that they will do in their own way. All you have to do is just say, it's just time to believe in yourself and go do it. And then what they do will change it. The more that we push ourselves in those boxes, the more we will continue to fail the way we are.
No, I agree. I think that's it. Maybe that's kind of the message of the day is evaluating your box, whatever that is, and finding that way to break out of it and know that it's okay, because that it will be okay. That fear fear keeps you from doing a lot.
Well, I always make the joke that when my kids I've been dumped like seriously by like 16 times throughout my life by girls before I met my wife, right? And the first time I got dumped, it was devastating. I couldn't get over it. Like it was the end of the world. By the 16th time, I was like, yeah, whatever, it'll be next week, right? So the funny thing is about failure is you think failure is this end all be all, but then once you fell a few times, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. The next morning I get up and I go again. Sometimes a low level of success is substantially worse than failure because you stay mediocre and unhappy all the time. You take a good hard dip, you wake up the next morning and said, okay, how am I going to do this different? And that's where so I would encourage people to fail. Go fail. Just go on purpose. Go do something you're going to fail at and realize who cares? It's fine.
That's so good. Yeah, that's something I had heard somewhere. I've been trying to do it a little bit with our daughters is yes, we want to celebrate their wins and ask them like, what are the great things you did at school today? Or, but then it's flip it around and actually ask them or encourage them to do something and fail at it and tell me about it and celebrate that failure, because the lessons learned from that are immense, and being able to do that time and again. I mean, it's such a skill, and it'll lead to so many good things ultimately. And it's the opposite of what you think, where you think failure is the end. I mean, failure is the beginning. Failure is how you learn.
Right. And failure, if you never fell, then you don't even know who you are inside. I love that. Celebrate your failures. I think that's the best thing. Like there's a good chance that me deciding to bring somebody else into the store and going on the road and really diving on this. I might be back on here in 5 years because it was an epic failure, but I won't remember the last 5 years working 54 hours in the store any different than I did before. At least it'll be different, at least it'll be different. And I used to think we had too many people in the world. We're just so overcrowded. And then the other day I was on a run and I started thinking, if every individual person in this world did something to make the world better today, we wouldn't have enough people. We could double or triple. We could solve all the world's problems if we just quit picking at each other, quit choosing whether we're red or we're blue, if we're mask, no mask, if we quit doing that and just today said, okay, I'm going to do something to make the world better. Imagine if you had 7 billion people, we would need 14 billion and we could make anything happen. But instead, we take all of our time thinking we have to take from somebody else and we have to make conflict. I think you just go out there and fail. And I really do think people are good now. I don't have that feeling that there are more bad people than good people. I think most people are good. I think that the bad people are really small numbers.
Yeah. I think just flipping through the comments on your on just about any of your posts, and you see that you see people's goodness. We just need to provide them a place to you're providing them a place to express that, and to feel safe to express those things. And it turns out that at their core, people are good. People want to help. People want to. People are okay helping others, and I see it through your comments where all of a sudden it starts to other people giving suggestions, and and it goes from there. So I agree. I think it's easy to be cynical. I certainly am not. I'm guilty of. In fact, I'm probably worse than you. I think I know I am. You talk about that how the connection is so important to you, and getting out there and talking to people. It's for me it's similar, but it's funny because if you were to ask me, I say no, I don't like people. I don't want to talk to people. But then I'm constantly putting myself. I'm a family medicine physician. I'm all the things that I do that I have to be with people, but then I find out that I love it. I love the connection. My wife is the most social person you'll ever meet. And I'm always like, oh, really? We have to go do this with those people oh, really? And then I end up once I do it, get out of my box, and I love it. And that connection, I find I thrive on the connection, even though I think I don't.
Well, social anxiety is like super normal, especially for people that are constantly bombarded with having to solve problems, and that it's really normal. But to be able to remove yourself from saying, okay, it's not the person I dislike. I don't like the stress. I don't like the what ifs, and being able to remove that is a really hard thing. And everybody has to do it every morning. And I think, that everybody who says, oh, I don't like people, the truth is they just don't like they don't like the process, but they love the people. Yeah. And I think that the more that we encourage each other to be kind and good, that's the only thing that'll count when I'm gone. Like the rest of it won't count. It's the kindness I spread that will never be related back to me as an individual. That's the only thing that'll count. Because when you make somebody feel like they're loved and they're seen for 2 seconds, they do it for somebody else. And it wouldn't matter if I built a tower with my name on it. It wouldn't matter if I was president. None of it matters. It's those little acts of kindness, and I don't think we ever recognize them. So, I don't like being out in public all the time, but I sure do like people.
Yeah. Well, love what you've done. I seem to be more prone to TikTok. I'm not on Instagram as much, but you can't beat TikTok's algorithm. It's just it's ridiculous, and it's got me fully sucked in. So, but love. Congratulations. Everything. I think the reason you will and are successful is because the reasons you're doing it are just out of a pure good intent, and it's so refreshing to see that. And I just congratulate you for what you've done so far, and can't wait to.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate being on here. I think this is fantastic. I like being on all of these shows, and I appreciate really having people reach out. Like, it's a big deal when people I still get giddy over the fact that somebody wants to talk to me. I still might see myself as that pharmacist in the back that nobody wants to see. So I really appreciate it. You've made my day.
Not at all. Thanks so much for your time. And we're excited to see maybe the show go on the road with.
Let me know. I'll come visit you anytime. You're 2 hours south, and there's lots of the pie's not that far in between. I can slip up to the pie in the meantime. That's an easy conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for listening to Emergency Use Only, Empowered Living in a Complex World. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and that it helped bring some light into your day. Remember, you have the ability to overcome your problems and maintain positivity throughout your life.